Hello, transport nerds and fellow planners, and welcome back to Talking Planning. As part of my New Year's resolution, I wanted to relaunch State of the Plan. And guess what? I'm sticking with it, with the first month being a series launch and time to talk about getting work ready on the planner's pamphlet. February is a good chance to talk about university, with students commencing their degrees or getting back into their studies. So, roll the cheesy intro. In terms of my university journey, I did my urban planning degree between 2016 and 2019 at the Queensland University of Technology, QUT. So there is a little bit of a gap since I've done my degree, but not so much that I don't remember fairly important details about what it was like. And given that we're now returning to offices and classrooms in increasing numbers, I think the experience that I had at uni is starting to become more relevant again. I've also done some serious rearranging of my background since last time, and having lived in Orange for a few months, I've worked out what office space works best for me, and I even treated myself to a new standing desk. I've been on a little bit of a video hiatus for the past few weeks, and much of that comes down to how much extra work I've had to do. And spoiler alert, one of the topics in the Getting Ready for Uni section of this video is about creating a high quality workspace. Long story short, I've also taken on some extra duties this year and certainly have been putting in some more hours. But given that my early stages of talking planning were about keeping my thinking cap engaged whilst looking for work and trying to keep those critical skills active during a COVID lockdown, I guess that means in a roundabout way it actually paid off, and that explains why there's been a few less reviews of late. The channel has certainly deviated course a little bit since my initial objectives, but slowly but surely I'm trying to reintroduce a little bit more of that industry relevance to keep things fresh on this channel. So with that, let's launch into the planner's pamphlet. Welcome back to the Planner's Pamphlet, where we cover topics of importance for planning students and early stage career professionals, from someone who was in those shoes not that long ago. Given it's February, many people will be stepping onto university campuses for the first time, or starting a second, third, fourth, or further year of uni, and for some it's time to commence those graduate jobs. If the last one is your current stage, you'll probably appreciate the last episode on State of the Plan as food for thought. University is a crucial stage in career development and is often the first introduction that people have to industry professionals, save for a relative or close family friend that works in a specific industry. It's also an important time to make friends, have a bit of fun, but on a more serious note, meet the people who you will be entering the industry with. Chances are your uni classmates will end up being your co-workers, people you ring up for advice, or even your clients somewhere down the line, so it pays not to burn bridges now. Let's go through some of the things that you might want to keep in mind during your university journey. It can be easy to think of orientation week or O week as a half-day induction and then 4.5 days of holiday, but doing so could mean missing out on some of the clubs, societies, and associations that are on offer. Some of them can be pretty serious, like student associations for certain degrees or areas, like planning student associations, economic societies, science communities, and the like. Some of them are focused around doing good and charity, some are around supporting international communities and international students, and others, well, are kind of focused around drinking. Being involved in a mix of student societies and clubs has proven valuable in my experience. Being part of an industry-focused student association, in my case the Planning Student Association, was a good early introduction into the industry, and most of these events are run by Students, and then with industry speakers involved, a mix of lecturers from across the planning programs, and of course, students from across different years of study. When it comes to industry speakers, they may not be the most senior in their fields, but in some ways, that's actually a really good thing. Chances are they may be able to relate a little more to your sort of stage of life, studies, and career. Fun-focused student associations also provide a good change of pace and are a great way to relax after busy study sessions or exams. Student associations also tend to be quite cost-effective, and when you compare that with the costs for full industry associations, which are even with a student discount usually several times the price of a student club equivalent, it can be good to use that as an option as your first path of entry. From my experience and chatting with friends and acquaintances who went to other universities to study planning, group work usually features quite heavily, even when compared with many other degree programs. Long story short, you've got to get used to it. While I may not always feel that university will fully prepare you for entering the workforce, the group work component I think was pretty well covered, and thank goodness for that, even if you didn't think that at the time. When you go searching for planning jobs, you'll often see phrases like must be able to work independently and as part of a team, or team player, or collaborates well with others. And there's a reason for that. Beside the jargon, it's important. The truth is, you can't, don't, and won't know everything, and even if that can be hard to admit at times, it proves why teamwork is so important. In a university context, group work often involves divvying up research topics, working out the strengths of the team, keeping a project on track, preparing drafts, and practicing for presentations. And like in the real world, it won't always go to plan. People don't always pull their weight on projects, and sometimes you will find relationships get strained. But as I have found, having had to pull failed group projects from the brink on the final day, on several occasions, the value of good teamwork will become abundantly clear, and it will help you pick groups more carefully. Google Docs, slides, and sheets are favourites for assignment writing, as people can edit and work on documents in real time. But beware, when it comes to formatting, that's probably going to be left to one person, and the Office versions of software are going to definitely be your best bet when preparing a final. The advice on this might have changed a little since I graduated, thanks to the events of the last few years, but in most cases, attendance makes a big difference. Now, to be clear, lectures are usually recorded, and that was generally the case even when I went to uni and before Zoom and Teams became big things. Tutorials or studio workshops, on the other hand, tend to expect in-person attendance, and in some courses, that attendance can actually form part of your grade. Tutorials or studios, at least when I went to uni, were not typically recorded, so if you couldn't attend, hope you had a friend who was a meticulous note-taker. Even if attendance isn't mandatory or graded, you can often pick up on details that are much harder to cover in video. Audience questions, for example, may not be picked up by the lecturer's microphone, and I only found it to be the case in larger classes that you would find someone as a member of staff with a roving microphone taking questions. And of course, you also have the opportunity to ask questions at the end of a class or before a class without having your email buried in the thousands of other emails your lecturer or tutor has to deal with. We've talked about in-person attendance and group work, both of which are normally on-campus activities, but there are still plenty of solo assignments to do, mandatory and recommended readings, and exams to study for. Despite my questioning of Euclidean zoning in modern society, I do like a level of separation between work and play. By no means do you have to drop huge dollars into a setup, but having a quiet and comfortable place to work and study can be very worthwhile. In terms of creating a home workspace, think about your lighting, reducing distractions, and minimizing eye strain for tasks like writing and editing reports, preparing PowerPoints, reading from textbooks, or taking notes or drawing. So, here are a few things to keep in mind if you want to do up a nice workspace that helps it make a big difference in your study productivity and comfort. Getting a dedicated desk is well worth it if you have the space. Good room lighting and a reading light or desk lamp can make it way easier to scan through your planning law or any other planning textbooks. A supportive office chair is well worth it when you're 3 hours deep into writing a long report. For laptop users, an external monitor, mouse, and keyboard can be excellent for studying from home. But even if you don't want to stretch that far, get yourself a dedicated mouse. It's much easier to work with. And probably finally, have an organised space for your textbooks, stationery, and finished projects, and that will make it way easier to get things done generally. On another note, if you are looking for a laptop, tablet, or two-in-one device for uni, find out what programs you're expected to use, and that should help inform what specs you need your device to have. For many courses, all you'll need is something that can handle web browsing, document editing, and video playback. But some courses, including a fair few in planning, will require more advanced programs like Adobe Illustrator, InDesign, and Photoshop, and Esri ArcGIS, which is a common program for mapping. A word of caution to the Mac users out there: ArcGIS and some other specialized tools do not play nice with Mac, and especially if you're running Apple Silicon, so M1 or M2, you're really going to require extensive workarounds, or they will just flat out refuse to work. Many courses, planning being no exception, recommend or expect students to undertake work experience placements while studying. In fact, one of the guidelines in the Policy for Accreditation of Australian Planning Qualifications by the Planning Institute of Australia is practical experience and experiential learning, which when you break down that jargon means degrees should include work experience or at least projects supervised by qualified planners. My uni course had a mandatory work experience program, with 14 days being the minimum requirement, although if I waited till my final year to do that, that would have been 30 days, and that is the case today. Placements are typically self-sourced. That means students are expected to find an organisation that will host them as a placement student, and typically placements are unpaid. So, preparing for your placement involves several factors. Number 1, finding an organisation that will take you on board. Number 2, finding up to 30 days of time to do your placement. And finally, working out how to make up the equivalent of 6 weeks' pay if you have to cut back hours in your usual job. It may not come as a surprise, but many students aren't exactly enthused by the prospect of losing up to 6 weeks' pay to do mandatory self-source placements. But if you look carefully, there are sometimes some paid placement opportunities, although they can be few and far between. That being said, urban and regional planners are generally quite in demand at the moment, so your luck at scoring a paid placement might be quite a bit better than it was for me in 2018-2019. That being said, as inflation continues to bite and the economy, starts to destabilise, your negotiating power might start to reduce, so just keep that in mind. But either way, it's important to put in the effort, come to a placement with an open mind to learn, and make the most of the opportunity. It may even lead to a part-time or full-time planning job. University is one of the few times in your life where you can combine travel and learning, and sometimes even get someone else to foot the bill. Unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to go on exchange, that is to study overseas for a semester, but I did get to overseas travel with university twice, and I went to Singapore and Malaysia in 2018 and Singapore and Sri Lanka in 2019. One of the best ways to learn about what makes great places is to visit more of them. So travel can be a very valuable part of improving your knowledge and awareness as a planner. In my case, I also got to work with planning students in Sri Lanka and to learn how different the same profession can be internationally. If an opportunity does get advertised for a study tour, register your interest quick, as there are limited places on offer. Sometimes who gets to attend a tour is decided the day the opportunity is advertised, so it pays to be prompt. This might sound a little crazy, but after 3 or 4 or potentially more years of study, you'll probably still come out of university thinking, why didn't they teach me how to prepare a development application? Or Why did we spend so little time talking about these specific acts, planning schemes, and policies, and instead spent lesson after lesson talking planning theory, which really I haven't used in my job yet? And to be fair, when I graduated and got my first sorts of planning jobs, I thought the same thing. But one of my lecturers gave me a fantastic insight, and that is that the theories and ideas that you learn at uni will start to come into force and be quite useful about 5 years into your career. And you know what? She was absolutely right. I'm now at work actually acting at a senior planner level. And once you get to that stage, the fundamentals of group work, people management, planning theories, and bigger picture thinking start to take the front seat over basic understanding of legislation, policy, and practice. And from a more practical perspective, universities acknowledge the fact that it's not hard for rules, policies, and processes to change. After all, I work in a different state to where I studied, so there are lots of changes on that front. So with that hopefully pretty comprehensive guide of getting ready for uni, it's time to give me a sign. Give me a sign is a short segment for funny, interesting, or unusual signage that makes us ask further questions. Development assessment planners will often find themselves assessing building identification, signage, and advertising, and signs also help us navigate and interpret the urban environment. This week's Give Me a Sign was a hard choice to make. I went down to Sydney for an overnighter a few weeks back and had two pretty good contenders, but in the end, this wonderfully tidy example of an old night ride bus sign won out. When Sydney's train network goes to sleep, there are a number of night buses that keep people moving. And in most parts of the city, signage simply involves the route name for a night bus being added to a standard sign. In Summer Hill, though, this classic night ride sign persists, and it's in good enough condition to remain, especially as there are no other buses that use this stop during the day. For those historians among us who know the actual era that this signage was commonplace, let me know down below, but I thought it was a nice find. But for now, it's time to catch some PT. Play on the famous Ben Lee song, Catch Some PT, is a short segment for those transport spottos that are not ready for a full review, but warrant a little extra discussion. This week's discussion point is of an interesting sighting, a bus that made its way from Orange to Brisbane, and I saw both sides of it. Around the middle of last year, when I still lived in Parkes, I spotted this relatively nondescript looking white Volgren Optimus parked along McNamara Street on a trip to Orange for the day. At the time, it was on trial with Orange bus lines, although I never got the chance to catch it. Still, it made for an interesting sight amongst the bountiful bus techs roaming the city streets. I spotted it a couple more times, both on trips to Orange to look for places to buy or to sign paperwork with the solicitors. And then it just disappeared. I didn't think much of it at the time, concluding the trial was probably just over, and I never thought I'd see this bus again. But as luck would have it, it found a new home up north. The only reason I put two and two together is that number plate seemed a little familiar. And halfway between Buranda and Norman Park, it kind of just clicked. This bus now looks like it's enjoying life with Thomsons, who are now pretty much the staple operator of South East Queensland Rail since the push to go low floor, and Thomsons has also acquired a large batch of ex-Ventura low floors, which I've already had a closer look at. With that said and done, I think it's time to finish off this month's State of the Plan, and of course, best of luck to those starting uni, commencing another year, getting ready for their final year, and to the graduates making their way into the workforce. If you have any great uni or graduate tips, why not pop them in the comments section below and help out your future and ongoing students. If you've got some topics worthy of the planner's pamphlet, or some funny and interesting signage, or, of course, an entrant into Catch Some PT, you can pass those on via the social platforms or via email at talkingplanning.videos@gmail.com. So, thank you for joining me, and I will see you again soon.